Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic. As the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. Here are tonight's news. First, to Australia, Prime Minister Scott Morrison revealed his country was under a broad cyber attack from a state-based actor targeting government, public services and businesses with suspicions falling on China, warning Australians of specific risks and an increased tempo of attacks. The Prime Minister told the press conference that a range of sensitive institutions had been hit.
This activity is targeting Australian organisations across a range of sectors, including all levels of government, industry, political organisations, education, health, essential service providers and operators of other critical infrastructure. We know it is a sophisticated state-based cyber actor because of the scale and nature of the targeting and the tradecraft used. Those who are engaged in this are not doing this to help us. That's certainly not their intention, and so you could describe it as malicious. There are not a large number of state-based actors that can engage in this type of activity, and it is clear based on the advice that we have received that this has been done by a state-based actor with very, very significant capabilities.
Are known to have developed cyber warfare capabilities. Suspicions will likely fall on Beijing, which has recently slapped trade sanctions on Australian products amid an escalating row over Chinese influence. Australia enraged China by calling for an investigation into the origins of the coronavirus pandemic and accusing China of fueling a virus infodemic and engaging in economic coercion. China, increasingly unwilling to tolerate criticism of its more aggressive foreign policies, has warned its students and tourists against going to Australia and threatened more sanctions and sentenced an Australian citizen to death for drug trafficking. Australia's Signals Intelligence Agency said the current attack appears designed to hide authorship using so-called copy-paste cyber tools that can be easily found open source. They included proof-of-concept exploit code, software that's uploaded and remains uncompromised. In other news, an unarmed New Zealand policeman was shot and killed on an Auckland street on Friday, becoming the first officer to die on duty for more than a decade in the normally peaceful South Pacific nation. Take a look. Now, police said the officer and a colleague were approaching a crashed car when a gunman produced a rifle and then opened fire. New Zealand's Police Commissioner Andrew Costner said one officer died and another received serious leg injuries, and a bystander was struck and badly hurt as the two men drove off in a second car. Following a massive manhunt, a 24-year-old man was charged with several offenses, including murder on Friday night, and is expected to face court on Saturday, according to Costner. The investigation was continuing, and police have not ruled out charging other people over the incident. The dead policeman, whose details have not been released, is the 23rd to be shot dead on duty since 1890, according to the police website, with the previous fatal shooting in 2009. Costner declined to speculate on a possible motive for the shooting. Costner said the officers were unarmed when they came under fire, which is standard for New Zealand police. The force last week decided against introducing armed patrols, and Costner said the shooting would not prompt him to revisit the issue. However, he said police on duty in the West Auckland suburb of Massey, where the shooting took place, would be issued firearms for the time being as a precaution. The death comes just a day after Parliament voted to further tighten New Zealand's firearms laws in the wake of last year's Christchurch Mosque massacre, when a lone gunman murdered 51 Muslim worshippers. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern offered condolences to the officer's family and police colleagues. To the World Health Organization, which has called for countries to collaborate on the mass production of a COVID-19 vaccine once one is found that works against the new coronavirus. Some 300 trial vaccines are currently being tested, and 3 are close to starting the final phase of human testing, according to WHO Chief Scientist Dr. Soumya Swaminathan to journalists via video conference on Thursday. And assuming these trials are successful, there could be a couple of 100 million doses of one or more vaccines by the end of the year, according to the scientist, with billions more hopefully available in 2021. Now, to do this, she said countries need to support and invest in the COVID-19 vaccine global access facility known as COVAX.
WHO is working on a fair allocation mechanism, which we're discussing with our member states to see, can countries all come to an agreement on how you share a limited supply of vaccine? Let's say you have 50 or 100 million doses at the end of this year. Okay, how should the world share that? Should it go only to the countries which have paid for it or are capable of paying for it to cover their own populations? Or should it go to protect frontline health workers or the most vulnerable people, whether they are the elderly or whether they are people with other diseases? Certainly frontline workers, health workers, but also other kinds of first responders are at the highest risk, as we've seen, unfortunately.
The WHO official noted that other people at risk who would also benefit from a vaccine included the elderly, those with hypertension, diabetes, and dementia. Individuals in prisons, nursing homes, factories, and urban slums where outbreaks have been identified should. This month, WHO announced that the COVAX facility had signed a first deal with pharma giant AstraZeneca, securing access to 300 million doses of vaccine as they become available. Shops and cafes reopened in Singapore on Friday as coronavirus measures were relaxed. But the city-state's leader warned people not to go overboard celebrating. More than 2 months after a partial lockdown was imposed, massage parlors and spas also resumed operations, while beaches were no longer off limits and sports and other facilities open again. Social gatherings of up to 5 are allowed under the relaxed rules, but people must wear face masks and stay 1 meter or 3.3 rule that shut schools and non-essential businesses as a test and trace effort stabilized infection rates. The city-state's 5.7 million residents had been told to stay home unless they had good reason to go out. Singapore has the second highest number of confirmed infections in Southeast Asia, with more than 41,000 cases, mostly among foreign workers living in crowded dormitories. The death toll stands at 26. Meanwhile, Malacanang raised the alarm over the reported surge in the cases of violence against women and children since the implementation of community quarantine in March to curb the spread of the virus.
Implement po ng batas ang ating presidente kapag tumataas po ang mga krimen at ang domestic violence naman po ay isang krimen sa ating bansa, naaalarma po tayo. No? Kaya nga po nagkakaroon na tayo ngayon ng mga hotlines sa DSWD, sa PNP, kung saan po pwede humingi ng tulong po ang mga biktima.
President Duterte 4,260 cases of violations against women and children, while the country is under different levels of community quarantine. Around 2,183 women and 2,077 children have suffered violence, according to President Duterte's latest report. Then distribute a major recovery fund to revive a European economy ravaged by the coronavirus pandemic. On the table at Friday's virtual summit is a proposal from European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen for a 750 billion euro rescue fund that, if accepted, would mark a historic milestone for EU unity.
Virus to modernize. This is a chance Europe cannot afford to miss. I want a Europe which is better able to weather global storms and provide a safe home for future generations. So I'm looking forward to today's discussion. I'm convinced that for common success, this is a huge stimulus of 1,850 billion euros. And it does not only help the economies of the countries which were hit hardest by the virus, it also helps the countries whose economies have been hit hard indirectly.
Europe faces its biggest recession in the bloc's 63-year history, and states are under pressure to look beyond their own borders and to find ways to lift the whole continent. But opposition is fierce from countries known as the Frugal Four, the Netherlands, Sweden, Denmark, and Austria, who have promised to fight deep into the summer to rein in the spending. And lined up against the frugals are EU countries such as Italy and Spain that were the first and hardest hit by the pandemic and quickly asked for help from their better-off partners. Crippled with overstretched finances, these countries lack the ability to fight the recession with a wave of extra spending and are looking for a highly visible act of solidarity. To help pay for the recovery plan, the proposal floats EU-wide taxation without own resources would be like a motor without petrol, a European source warned. But this too could prove too controversial for several Google app for a contact tracing app. Shelby Dusdus joins us live from the United Kingdom. Hello, Shelby.
Hello, Alma.
Hi.
Thank you for having me here today. 7th of May. However, the New Scientist has commented that the capacity of human trackers is questionable, especially as lockdown begins to lift in Britain. In response to this dilemma, Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government was due to start unrolling its own app at the beginning of June. However, as you mentioned, Alma, not every revealed major problems. Initially, Boris Johnson promised to deliver a world-beating test and trace system, but after trials of the app on the Isle of Wight, in England's south coast, it was found that the software registered 75% of Android phones, but only about 4% of Apple's iPhones. This has caused weeks of delay until, on Thursday, the 18th of June, Health Secretary Matt Hancock announced that the UK will now use technology developed by Apple and Google for the UK's contact tracing app. Let's listen in to yesterday's evening announcement.
This country. Because of this testing, we discovered a technical barrier that every other country building their own app is also now hitting. We found that our app works well on Android devices, but Apple's software prevents iPhones being used effectively for contact tracing unless you're using Apple's own technology. After we started our work on our app, Google and Apple then started working on their own product. And as soon as they did this, we began working on both. We kept our options open in the same way that we'd leave no stone unturned. So I asked Dido and the NHS X team to make sure that they worked on both products, contact tracing app. So as it stands, our app won't work because Apple won't change their system, but it can measure distance, and their app can't measure distance well enough to a standard that we are satisfied with. Throughout this, for me, what matters is what works, because what works will save lives. And I will work with anyone, public or private sector, here or overseas, to gain any inch of ground against this disease. So we've agreed to join forces with Google and Apple to bring the best bits of both systems together. I've always been optimistic about the contribution that technology can make in this battle against coronavirus. And coming together in this way will bring together some of the best minds to find a solution to this global challenge and help to save lives.
In response to this announcement, critics argue that the US technology should have been embraced much earlier. Even the Labour Party's health spokesman, Jonathan Ashworth, told the BBC that he was not surprised, as this is another example of where the government's response to this crisis has been slow and badly organised. Numerous other countries, including Ireland, Germany and Italy, have opted to use the Google Apple technology, which is more privacy-friendly. According to the Apple website, the Google Apple system will use Bluetooth technology to help governments and health agencies reduce the spread of the virus, whilst keeping in mind user privacy and security. In contrast to earlier results of the UK's own contact tracing app, according to the BBC, the Google Apple model was able to log 99% of Android and Apple phones. However, the model appears to have weaker distance calculation abilities. Google has emphasized that the technology builds on it, rather than use it as a fully functioning application. By autumn, the government aims to launch an app, but it is still unclear whether this will involve contact tracing functions. Instead, it may only be used to report a person's symptoms and to order tests. As of today's date, there has been no further confirmation of when a fully fledged contact tracing app will be available in the UK. Back to you, Alma.
Shelby, can you further explain how the Bluetooth technology works?
Yes. According to Wires, Bluetooth is perfect for low energy wireless transmission, which can run on your phone, so in the background. If you were to encounter other phones, your phone will log this as long as both devices are running the COVID-19 tracking app. The most important part is that the logs won't include any personal information about you. Instead, it will use a numerical ID code that will change every 14 days. The app will even be able to log how long you have been in contact with the person by referencing how long two phones have been within the same area.
All right. Thank you very much, Shelby, for your updates. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Shelby Dostos, reporting for EBC United Kingdom. We live in interesting times.
Eagle News, we'll be right back.
Ilong at bibig sa tuwing babahing at uubo. Gamitin ang looban ng siko. Kung gagamit naman ng tissue, ay tiyaking maitapon ito agad sa tamang basurahan. Iwasang hawakan ang ilong o bibig. Ugaliing maghugas ng mga kamay gamit ang sabon at
Kung ikaw ay may ubot, sipon, o kaya naman ay may inaalaga ang pasyente na mayroong simptomas ng respiratory illness, itapon ng gamit na face mask sa tamang basurahan.
Sundin ang social distancing. Panatilihin ang 1 metrong layo mula sa ibang tao, lalo na kapag nasa labas ng bahay. Kung maaari ay umiwas muna sa mga matataong lugar.
Mahalaga ang kalinisan upang sakit ay maiwasan.
Landmarks, Linggo, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi.
Hello there. Imagine, and it goes on and on until it became an epidemic. But what if Demi stayed at home? Then those two wouldn't have contracted the virus. Then those people would have not. It's everyone's, and you can be a huge help. Follow social distancing, or better yet, stay at home.
East Africa is bracing for a third outbreak of desert locusts, with billions of the destructive insects about to hatch and threaten food supplies in a region already reeling from damaging rains and the coronavirus pandemic. Spurred by favorable weather conditions, the migratory pests have descended on East Africa in record numbers since late use of pesticides. Tens of thousands of hectares of cropland and pasture have already been damaged across the Horn and East Africa, according to the International Rescue Committee, in a report this month noting even a small swarm could devour the same amount of food in a day as approximately 35,000 people. In Ethiopia, between January and April, locusts destroyed 1.3 million hectares of grazing land and nearly 200,000 hectares of crops, resulting in the loss of 350,000 tons of cereal, SAGAD, the East Africa Regional Organization, said in a June report. The World Bank in May approved a $500 million program to help countries vulnerable to hunger in East Africa fight the pests eating their way across the region. Pesticide spraying operations have been underway since February, helping wipe out staggering numbers of the insects capable of multiplying their numbers 20-fold every 3 months. In other news, China has formally charged 2 Canadians with spying, according to officials on Friday, more than 18 months after they were arrested in a spat between Beijing and Ottawa. The pair were detained shortly after Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou was arrested in Canada on a U.S. warrant in what is widely believed to have been the prosecution of ex-diplomat Michael Kovrig and businessman Michael Spavor, who were suspected of foreign espionage and providing state secrets. And the move comes just weeks after a key ruling in the Mang case, where a Canadian judge ruled that proceedings to extradite her to the United States will go ahead. The United States wants Mang extradited to face trial on charges related to the Chinese telecom equipment maker's alleged violations of U.S. sanctions against Iran. Diplomatic relations between Canada and China have hit rock bottom over the arrests, damaging trade between the countries. Chinese embassy in Ottawa accused the United States of trying to bring down Huawei, and China has also blocked billions of dollars worth of Canadian agricultural exports. The arrest of Spavor 9 days after Mang was taken into custody have been widely described or decried as retribution. While the eldest daughter of Huawei founder Ren Zhengwei has been out on bail and living in a mansion in Vancouver, the 2 Canadians remain in China's opaque penal system. Now both men have been charged with spying on national secrets and providing intelligence for outside entities. The U.S. Supreme Court handed President Trump a big legal defeat on a major focus of his domestic agenda. It overturned his decision to end protections for immigrants who arrived in the U.S. illegally as children. And the decision gave a reprieve, though possibly only temporary, to hundreds of thousands of people brought or sent to the United States as youngsters. They grew up here, went to school, worked, and started families without ever having legal status. Take a look.
I'm a DACA recipient and a youth leader with United We Dream and United We Dream Action.
Today, we got a good decision by the Supreme Court. 100,000 young people to continue to live their lives, to continue to live their dreams, and to continue to make America what it already is thanks to immigrants. We stand today proud to say that we have advocated for almost 2 decades now for a pathway to citizenship for dreamers. We are not there yet, though, but we know that this is not a sprint, but rather a marathon.
So DACA has been a life-saving opportunity for me. I turned 18 right whenever I received my permit in the mail, and it was the most incredible day of my life. As it's been noted, this has been an extremely difficult time for us. Again, right now, it is horrible.
When Trump tried to cancel it, there was this gloomy feeling over all of us. We were in limbo, you know? We didn't know it was going to happen. And today I woke up to the news that it finally was protected. And I didn't know I was going to feel so excited.
Personally, I actually was a soccer coach before this and a swimming coach at a high school and elementary and middle school. And I stopped because Trump actually ended the program.
And what DACA means to me, it means my whole life. Thanks to this program, I was able to purchase a house when I was only 20 years old. I was able to buy a car, was able to get my...
High Court's second rebuff of administration policies this week. Justices said President Trump's 2017 move to cancel his predecessor Barack Obama's landmark Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, or DACA program, was arbitrary and capricious. Chief Justice John Roberts, who sided with the court's liberal members in a 5-4 decision, stressed it was not an assessment of the correctness of the DACA program itself. Instead, they said the Trump administration had violated government procedures in the way it sought to quickly rescind DACA in September of 2017 based on weak legal justifications. Now, the ruling suggested there are legal administrative methods that President Trump could use to cancel DACA, putting the onus back on the administration if it wants to pursue the issue. Let's listen in.
So, in theory, the Trump administration, if they wanted, the Supreme Court told them that they can terminate DACA with a more detailed explanation following the Administrative Procedure Act. So it's important to keep monitoring the situation, to keep fighting, to keep demanding a path for Dreamers, because it's not over. We still have to keep fighting.
Chief Justice John Roberts, who sided with the court's liberal members in a 5-4 decision, stressed it was not an assessment of the correctness of the 2012 DACA program itself. Instead, they said the Trump administration had violated government procedures in the way it sought to quickly rescind DACA in September 2017 based on weak legal justifications. On Twitter, President Trump turned the decision into a call to support him in the November presidential election so that he can appoint more conservative justices to the High Court. Do you get the impression that the Supreme Court doesn't like me? Trump tweeted. These horrible politically charged decisions coming out of the Supreme Court are shotgun blasts into the face of people that are proud to call themselves Republicans or conservatives. President Obama created DACA 8 years ago this week by executive order. It protects young immigrants brought to the country without proper documentations as children from being deported and allows them to work legally. President faced a series of court battles over it. Japanese prosecutors arrested the country's former justice minister, a close ally of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and his lawmaker wife over allegations of vote buying during her electoral campaign last year. Now, the scandal is the latest headache for the Prime Minister, who has seen his approval rating sink over his handling of the coronavirus crisis and faced criticism over Abe said the arrest was very regrettable and he felt responsible for appointing Kawai as Justice Minister. Take a look.
本日、我が党所属であった現職国会議員が逮捕されたことについては大変遺憾であります。かつて法務大臣に任命した者としてその責任を痛感しております。国民の皆様に深くお詫び申し上げます。
The Prime Minister said he would offer a full explanation to the country about the scandal, but didn't mention any possibility of his own resignation. Despite Japan's relatively low death toll from the coronavirus, 935 deaths have been confirmed so far. The Prime Minister has been criticized for an embarrassing U-turn on stimulus funds and ridiculed for a program distributing masks nationwide. He has also come under fire for his efforts to change the retirement age of prosecutors, viewed as an attempt to keep on a favored top prosecutor and promote him. The bid ended when the prosecutor was forced to resign following revelations he had defied coronavirus lockdown guidelines and gambled on mahjong games with journalists. Eagle News will be right back.
Hello, my name is Robin and I'm 5 years old. My mom and dad said many people are getting sick. That is why we have to stay at home. That is why I cannot go to school. I cannot play outside. And I cannot even visit my friends. We can only go outside if we visit the doctor or if we need to buy some food. And when we get home, we have to wash our hands. While I'm at home, I do my homework, clean up my toys, help cooking our food. We stay home so we can all play together again. Bye!
Welcome back. Equities rose Friday as investors weighed up hopes of a quick economic recovery against fresh virus worries and geopolitical tensions. Another 3 months of big gains for global stock markets, fueled by the reopening of economies as well as trillions of dollars in government and central bank support. And a volatile week, indices appear to be leveling out as investors awaited the next major catalyst, such as a vaccine for COVID-19. Several places, including Beijing, Tokyo, Germany, Florida, and Texas. Now, adding to the unease were simmering tensions between the two Koreas as well as between China and India following a deadly border skirmish this week in the Himalayas. President Trump provided fresh uncertainty by tweeting that the U.S., quote, certainly does maintain a policy option under various conditions of a complete decoupling from China. But observers still saw it as unlikely the superpowers would break off all economic activity. Elsewhere Friday, the British pound struggled to bounce back from the Thursday's drop that came after the Bank of England unveiled more cash stimulus to prop up the UK economy battered by the virus. Oil prices rose again on optimism over the demand out. Hong Kongers wearing Mickey Mouse ears and face masks flocked back to Disneyland as the city's park reopened after nearly 5 months of closure during the coronavirus pandemic. Visitors queued up in blazing summer heat for the park's reopening, submitting to temperature checks at the entrance. Signs plastered across the park and large stickers on the ground reminded visitors to maintain social as they queued for rides. Disney's parks across the globe have been hammered by the coronavirus, and Hong Kong's is only the second to reopen after Shanghai. Tourism operators are desperate to restart business, trialing different forms of social distancing as lockdowns ease. On Thursday, hand sanitizing stations had been put up at regular intervals throughout the park, and all guests were required to wear face masks throughout their visit unless eating. Hong Kong was one of the first plagued by the pandemic and enveloping much of the world in a recession. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said English schools would receive £1 billion in funding to help pupils catch up after missing months of classes due to the coronavirus. Now, the announcement came as Health Minister Matt Hancock said the government had lowered the country's coronavirus alert level after a recommendation by scientific advisors. The move from level 4, where transmission is high or rising, to level 3, where the epidemic is in general circulation, quote, was a big moment for the country, he said. The government is grappling for positive news after facing sustained criticism over a broken pledge to have all primary school children in England return before the summer if social distancing rules requiring people to keep 6.5 feet apart remain in force. The new money includes £650 million for state-run primary and secondary schools to lift educational outcomes and £350 million to help tutor the most disadvantaged youngsters. Head teacher said it expects it to be spent on evidence-based interventions, in particular small group tuition. Concern has risen about the impact of school closures on children, particularly those with no computer or internet access. In the Philippines, while President Duterte has stood pat in his decision is developed, Malacanang said that the proposal to hold F2F classes could still be studied for areas under the new normal. Take a look.
Well, kung maalala nyo po, ang naging polisiya ng IATF na naging rekomendasyon nila kay Presidente, nagdesisyon, no? In-overturn po niya ang IATF at ang sabi niya, no face-to-face hanggang walang bakuna. Hayaan nyo po, never say die, no? Pagdating naman po ng Agosto, titignan natin ang datos kung ganong karaming lugar ang nasa new normal na at ibibigay natin uli, no, ang suhestyon na baka naman po pwede na mag face-to-face doon sa mga new normal, pero as of now, the President has overruled the IATF and has correctly decided na hindi po dapat isapalaran ang kalusugan ng ating kabataan.
The Department of Education, or DepEd, has set the opening of classes for the school year 2020 to 2021 on August 24. Colleges and universities using full online education can open anytime, while those using flexible learning can open anytime in August 2020. F2F classes will not be permitted until a vaccine for the COVID-19 is available in compliance with the President's order. DepEd said it would implement a blending learning approach, which makes use of radio, television, online, and modular learning. Commission on Higher Education, or CHED Chairman Prospero de Vera, also disclosed that they are studying the possibility of allowing limited F2F classes in areas free of the virus. In other news, Dr. Jose Rizal's affection for Germany is evident in his many travels. This year marks the 159th birth anniversary of our national hero, and as a tribute, our EBC correspondent Malu Francisco traces his travels.
Heidelberg, Wilhelmsfeld, two places in Germany that are close to the heart of many Filipinos. Places where the national hero of the Philippines, Dr. Jose Rizal, lived for half a year. Heidelberg and Wilhelmsfeld both belong to the federal state of Baden-Württemberg, southwest of Germany. Let's retrace the steps of Rizal in Heidelberg. From Paris, Rizal arrived in the town on the 3rd of February, 1886. His training in ophthalmology for the sake of his mother's failing eyesight. The Heidelberg Castle is the town's top attraction. The castle dates back to the year 1200. The building expanded under different kings, adopting the Gothic and Renaissance styles in architecture. The castle, however, suffered destruction from lightning strikes, fires, and wars. Later, it was decided that the castle would only be partly restored. In summer, the castle serves as a stage for cultural presentations. It could be that Rizal himself came here to watch a presentation. Heidelberg is home to Germany's oldest university. Founded in 1386, the University of Heidelberg is well known for its world-class research program and in ophthalmology. This is the Grand Hall, and Rizal must have attended a lecture here. From this place in the old town, Rizal would walk through the main street to go to the university's eye clinic. Outside on the wall of the building, the plaque says, "Here on Bergheimer Street, number 20, in ophthalmology from February to August 1886 under Professor Dr. Otto Becker, Director of the University Eye Clinic." Then, from the eye clinic in the afternoons, Rizal would walk back to his boarding house near the university. A Rizal marker is on the wall. In this building, on the former Ludwigsplatz 12, Rizal stayed from February 18 to June 1886. And here, he wrote his poem, "To the Flowers of Heidelberg," on April 22, 1886. Go to my country, go, O foreign flowers, sown by the traveler along the road, and under that blue heaven that watches over my loved ones, recount the devotion the pilgrim nurses for his native sod. Let's go over to the old bridge. Here the Neckar River might have reminded Rizal of the Pasig River. And there by the riverbank, imagine Rizal walking on a spring day. He sees the flowers of Heidelberg, the Odenwald woods and mountains around, reminding him perhaps of Mount Makiling in his home province. Here, a bench and a marker have been placed, remembering Rizal. To the flowers of Heidelberg, go to my country, foreign flowers, sown by the traveler along the road. The foremost leader of the anti-colonial Philippine freedom movement was convicted in Manila as a revolutionary and executed on December 30, 1896. From the Neckar Valley, Rizal would take a walk to the mountainside. Called the Philosopher's Path, it's been a favorite place for artists, writers, and others who simply want to enjoy nature and the view of the castle and experience the romantic aura that surrounds the city of Heidelberg. During one of his walks, Rizal met a German pastor. His name was Karl Ulmer, and the two became fast friends. Pastor Ulmer invited Rizal to spend his vacation with his family in his home in Wilhelmsfeld, a village near Heidelberg. While in Wilhelmsfeld, Rizal wrote the last chapters of his world-famous Noli Me Tangere.